Oyvind, good to see you as always. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat with us. You're doing something that particularly interests me, so I'm grateful that you're willing to chat about it, really. Just to kick the interview off, tell us about the mission. Tell us what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate the invitation, and I like what you're trying to do here, trying to dive deeper into the minds of CEOs. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can benefit a lot from that. I didn't have that benefit myself when I started my career back in the day, so I really think a lot of people will find what you're doing very helpful.
Well, I hope so.
Um,
We'll find out soon, won't
yeah,
we?
let's
Carry on.
say when it comes to what we're trying to achieve, I think it needs a little background. I say to some people that we're living in what we call the age of Kronos. Kronos was a Greek god that was slayed by Zeus because he was eating his children. And I think that's basically what we're seeing today, where you have an older population that has benefited massively from the development of society, the social welfare state. And today you have a younger generation that just doesn't get the same benefit. For the first time ever, young people will not be able to have a better quality of life than their
Mm.
parents did.
Yeah.
And that leaves a lot of people disillusioned, I would say. So Clover tax exists because the system just doesn't work anymore. Now, the deal used to be that you work hard, you pay your taxes, you pay your dues to society, you contribute, and you get to retire with dignity. And that's no longer the truth in the deal
Mm.
because the welfare state can't maintain itself when you have a dwindling population just due to, lower birth rates. People can't afford their homes, cost of living crisis, just across the UK and EU, prices for the cost of living has risen by 25 plus percent. The prices of property has risen somewhere between 40 and 200% when you look at the UK to across the European Union. Rents are up over 100% in a lot of European countries as well. So what do you do as a young person today? And we went through that, and I'm, slightly older than the young today, by being 38. But I think if you're Gen Z today or Gen Alpha, like you feel quite, that you didn't get to stand on the shoulders of those who came before you and then reach a step further for your generation. And you could say maybe for better or for worse, democracy is representative. Old people vote, young people don't, but young people also in the minority in terms of, size of the population, and therefore politics usually reflect that. I don't think I've seen a politician anymore plant trees that they won't get to enjoy the shade of. And basically because of that, Clover Tax came to be through the fact that I built a company in Norway myself. I moved to Germany to expand that company, grow it, and then we were lucky enough to sell it during the height of COVID. So we got a very good price for it. And I spent 15 years of my life building that, taking all the risk. And at the end of the day, I earned no pension points. I got no, like nothing from the government. It just raised taxes.
Yeah.
And I figured out when I got my exit that, well, the state's going to sit with 52% of what I own. I'm going to tax on all of it, but I don't own more than 48% of it if I move back to Norway. And I thought, well, that's not a good deal. That's not what I signed up for. Uh, that's not what my father and mother got to benefit from. So I started looking and researching extensively international tax law, tax jurisdictions, and basically business and entrepreneurial friendly countries around the world. And I took a trip around about 20, 30 of them and ended up then landing in Cyprus as the one that fit me the best.
Mhm.
So basically, what we are trying to achieve long term here is to build the go-to ecosystem for strategic relocation for people, their families, and their companies. Fully legal, of course. And yeah, I don't think I can summarize it more than that, but
Yeah, no, I get the proposition, and I totally understand that, and I think a lot of young entrepreneurs get that as well. Um,
mm,
Tell me, when you realized that this is a kind of a global issue, right?
mhm,
And you decided that you're going to start building this business that is about helping people access those jurisdictions
mhm.
and get a better deal, if you like. At that point, what did you think was the big obstacle that was going to get in your way? And has that proven to be the case? Go back to the beginning and tell us
Mm.
about that.
Well, I think the big obstacle was clearly navigating tax law. If you look at tax law for most countries, like the UK, for example, I think it's 12,000 pages or something like that. That covers everything that is in the
Crazy, isn't it?
British tax system.
Crazy. Yeah.
And it's the same thing. I lived in Germany at the time. It's not easy to navigate. And even when you sit down with a genuine tax lawyer and you pay them for their time, they still go out like, we need to spend maybe 5 people, manpower, 40, 50 hours to figure this out, whether you should establish a company in Dubai and whether having then you sitting in Germany, for example, due to controlled foreign company rules, regulations will impact you negatively or positively. Like it's ridiculous. So that was the first step, like really big hurdle was to understand what's the basic foundation of tax law.
Mm.
And could I do that? Because I don't have a legal background. Like I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, and especially with marketing and sales and brand building, really. And taxes was nothing that never interested me until I suddenly had, a decent amount
You
of
have
money
to
and
pay them.
and I needed to pay a lot of them. And for, of
Yeah.
course, coming from Norway, I also had wealth tax I needed to pay every year, regardless if I made money or not, which is a massive decrease of, money you could have invested in the economy and into new startups and so on. So basically, tax law was the first massive hurdle and understanding how that worked. And
Yeah.
once I got an understanding of the basic principles, I just built on that. And I spent 4 years just diving deeper and deeper and became more interesting as I went along. And then, the dual tax agreements became the second hurdle. How do you handle taxes between two countries specifically? Because they're different from every country. And that became the second big, big hurdle that I had to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And I mean, you're successful now. I mean, you're just about to expand to a boatload more countries. I
Yes.
mean, was there ever a moment when you thought this may not work out?
Oh, absolutely. I think it was more during the research process, really, that I felt that this is getting way too complicated. It's still complicated. And of course, I'm not the one giving tax advice. We have professional tax lawyers to do that.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I think that, it took 4 years to get to the point where I could press the start button. And it was similar experience that I had with my previous business, which was an online e-commerce pet store in Norway, which became the largest online pet store in the country. We had 3 years without almost any revenue. The needle hardly moved. And
Mm.
then we got product market fit and it took off like a rocket. And it's been a little bit like that with this business as well. In the previous business, I seeked capital and got investors on board. In this one, we haven't, and we don't seek investors, not at this time at least. So we're trying to build this more like brick by brick and bootstrap it more. Um, but yeah, even during like very tough calls with clients where they have very, very tough questions regarding, jurisdictions and setups
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
utilizing more or less gray area techniques, which of course we don't deal with. You do feel like, okay, when you have 10, 15-minute meetings like that in a row, like, am I over my head here, right? So you do that and you get quite, I think, disenchanted when you don't see results after 2 years, 3 years of work. But sometimes you just need to persevere through, and you do get signals along the way. I believe that you are on the right track. You have that one good meeting, that one first client signs on, and they're very happy, and they come back and buy more, even though you had another 20 meetings that just didn't lead to anything.
Yeah.
So I think it's always about finding those tiny wins and celebrating them along the way.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean, I think
yeah,
you're totally right about that, and it requires an awful lot of resilience, I think, doesn't it? I mean, to persist at it, even when things are not going well. I mean, let me just sort of pick up that the CEO's job. I mean,
yeah.
that's the role that really drives the company. I mean, one of the things that interests me is
Mhm.
how CEOs cut through the noise, how you sort of separate out all the kind of noise that's going on, and say, okay, well, there's all this stuff happening. I'm going to do this. I mean, how do you manage that? Because there's always
Mm.
101 things to be distracted by.
Oh, very true. I think that you need to simplify the CEO role because you can, especially in the beginning, you need to touch everything. You're the monkey that runs around trying to make sure that nothing breaks. But at some point, when you start getting employees on board, I think the main role of the CEO is to be the one who carries the torch through
Yeah,
the darkness. You are the guiding light, you're the visionary of the company. People follow you in that torch that you're carrying, and you have this vision, that goal out there in the distance, that your guiding star, that's what we're trying to get to. Now, you don't know how to get there. You just know that we're going to get
yeah,
there.
yeah,
And
yeah,
having that conviction and giving that conviction over to your team so that they believe in the message as much as you do, I think it's critical of the CEO role. Um, I think also the CEO's role is to help get the right people on the bus and point it in the right direction.
Yeah.
And that's where it stops in a way when it comes to, micromanagement. You should never do that as a CEO. A leader should never do themselves what somebody else can do almost as good.
Yeah.
And I think it's very hard, especially when you're a CEO founder. I think it's even harder. I burned out 2 times by being that kind of person where I had to touch everything and it wasn't good enough. And you learn along the way that that's not the way to operate, and you need to give people trust. But I think that's really important for any CEO is to have a fantastic COO.
Yeah.
You point the bus, you help get the right people on the bus, and the COO drives the bus. They make sure that you get to the next stop along the road.
Let's come back to getting the right people on the bus in a minute, because you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It's really important. One of the interesting dilemmas is this thing about how you balance working in the business,
Yeah.
certainly at the beginning, with working on the business. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but
Mm.
how do you balance that? Because just to pick up your point, I mean, I always think as the chief executive officer, not as the chief executive officer, but the chief everything officer. That's really
Yeah.
what the CEO means at the
Very
beginning,
true.
because you've got to have a hand in everything to start with. As it grows, though, you need to find space to stand back and work on the business, make sure it's going in the right direction, and so on. I mean, how do you balance that tension as the business grows?
Well, I think that, if you're not a sole founder, I wouldn't recommend anyone being a sole founder. It's really, really
Tough,
hard.
isn't
I
it?
think having a proper team around you, a really good founder team, which is very hard to find. But I think once you have that, you can actually bounce a lot of ideas and thoughts off of them.
Hmm.
I think that helps a lot. I think that if you have a supportive spouse, it's been very helpful for me to basically be able to talk to my wife about very like complicated matters and what I should do. And she's very good at cutting through the noise with me, helping me get away from a situation where I'm sitting and I'm just overloaded by noise. And she's like, well, this is really about this thing and this thing.
That's
So
invaluable, isn't it? It's
yeah, it's
invaluable.
valuable. Yeah,
Yeah.
I truly, I think that your business partner in life is the most critical thing that you have. Young founders might not have that, but at least then when you get a little bit older and you have a long-term relationship, you have a husband or a wife, I think that's absolutely invaluable in helping cutting through that noise. If you don't have that, using your business partners for that, and also just getting out of the office. Like one of the most effective things that I do to try to get my thoughts cleared and back to what is really the issue, I go to the gym.
Right.
Working
Yeah.
out helps a lot because you can't think about 100 thoughts at the same time and lift heavy weights or do whatever you do or run a mile
Gives you
or
space. Gives you
yeah,
space to
exactly. It
think,
gives you
doesn't it?
space. Go to the beach, go for a walk in the forest, whatever, is in your environment where you can get a little bit of peace and quiet where there's no noise around you. I think that helps a lot. And that's usually where I've made some of the better decisions that I've done for the company.
Yeah. Let me ask you about one other aspect of the CEO's job. I mean, well, it's not necessarily easy to lead, but it's easier when things are going well.
Yes.
The real challenge is when things go horribly wrong, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, what's your take on kind of managing through, you know, things just kind of going off, going wrong, not working
hmm
properly? There being, tell us about, give us your take on managing through those kind of difficult
Mm.
circumstances.
No, I had my fair share of that while I was building my pet business in Norway.
Yeah,
We almost got bankrupt twice. Investors were unhappy,
yeah,
employees didn't know what was going on, and you learn on the job really. But I think that the most important thing when things are going really badly is first of all be honest about it with people around you and be honest with yourself. I've seen founders that I mentored that doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that they don't have product market fit or they will be out of cash in 2 weeks and the customers are not coming or whatever the reason is, right? And they're trying to hide that. I see that the most common thing. They try to hide it from their
yeah,
team. They try to hide it
yeah,
from their investors. And honestly, the best thing I've experienced is that if you're honest with your team about it, they will come up with ideas. And I remember we had this, all hands meeting where we were telling everybody that we were basically losing 100,000 euros a month, and we were telling people we're driving a Tesla into the ocean every month. We're not profitable. We're growing, but getting cash now is very, very difficult. It's not that kind of climate, and we just don't have the margin yet because that was one of the biggest issues we
yeah.
had in the business. And we said to everybody, we're going to try to fix it. We're doing our best. We want you to be, this is how much cash we have. This is our runway. This is what you can expect. And then we asked, does anyone have any ideas? And out of 18 people, there are 18 hands in the air. that had ideas because they feel it.
yeah,
You know, they understand you are sitting with the rest of the founder team or investors in the room constantly talking. If there's meetings that not being briefed to the rest of the organization, especially when you're a smaller one, they know, they understand. And they're starting to talk behind the scenes. Should we find a new job? Is this really going well? So I found that being very honest with investors, being honest with your employees, especially, you will get a lot of help, a
because
lot of good ideas.
they've got a vested interest in it being successful, haven't they?
Absolutely. I think that especially if you have stock options programs, but I think that in general, you know, the larger the company becomes, the people that work the closest to the customer have a lot of knowledge about what's not working in the business and how it affects the customer. And I think a lot of CEOs and founder teams for that matter get lost in that the further and further away they get from the customer. And that makes it very hard to manage through times of crisis. But I think honesty is the key. You'll get everyone in your team to help you get out of it. And we did. We got investors to help. They pulled every resource they could. Our employees worked really, really hard. They stayed longer. They worked weekends. Nobody asked them to. They just did it. And I think that as a CEO, you need to be the one to set that standard as well. You're the first to come into the office and the last one to leave. You have to be. If you lead by that example, most other people will follow that lead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's very well made points, actually. I mean, just to come back to the thing you touched on earlier about getting the right people on the bus. I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy to say, it's a bit more difficult to do. I mean, give us your take
Yes.
about that process of getting the right people on the bus and then into the right seats.
Yes. No, absolutely. This requires a little bit of additional explanation, I think, because hiring the right people is very difficult, and especially in countries in Scandinavia, the worker protection is extremely high. It's very high, difficult to fire somebody once you hire them. They basically need to embezzle or threaten you or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will just stay in your business and on social welfare and security, and where you also have to contribute. So hiring people incorrectly or the wrong people in Norway especially becomes very, very expensive. And we made some bad decisions early on where we hired for heart and well, we didn't check for all the other things that we should check for. So we ended up developing our own recruitment process for it, which we got inspiration from another IT company in our city of Bergen that gave us the foundation, and then we started adding on and changing that as we saw and what we needed. So we built our whole recruitment process because we felt that people is going to be the most important asset in our company, and therefore we need to invest accordingly in that. So we started, writing um, a job listing, and we said you have to answer these three questions, otherwise you're not qualified. Forget the letter you send with your application. Just send your CV and answer these three simple questions, which was related to the position, and it showed a level of detail. So it was a self-selection process, right? If you didn't answer those questions, you went straight into the bin. If you answered them, you were on to the next round.
Mm.
Then we sit down and we had an interview. So we interviewed every candidate for about 3 hours, first time
Wow.
interview. Yeah, after we'd reviewed their CV, and then we felt that, okay, the CV is pretty good. They answered the questions satisfactory. And there wasn't hard questions. There were questions like, what is a great customer experience to you? Tell me about a time that a customer service representative went above and beyond. Or what does customer service mean to you in logistics, for example? So we tried to make it all about the customer. And then during that 3 hour interview, the CEO and the person that would be managing or leading that person that we were hiring had to be in the interview. So to get a feel for the candidate.
Mm.
And most candidates in that process start talking about, straight into the resume. They're selling themselves, right? Which is what they're trained to do and what school teaches you. And I don't think that's very helpful.
Mm.
So we could say, okay, let's take it back. Tell me where you grew up. How was it growing up there? What made you, how was school like? What does your parents do? Do you have any siblings? What do they do? And we get to know the person. It becomes a conversation. And eventually that comes into their career path because we then figure out, did they have adversities in their lives that they overcame? Did they come from a broken home? A lot of people actually share that kind of information without us having to pry that kind of stuff out of them. And you see how they dealt with adversity. You see how they overcame life challenges. Not like this particular, tell me about this one time you succeeded at something or you had a hard time at work, because it's ingenuine. You get the real person and you get to know them, and you're building a repertoire and relationship early on. It's equally for their benefit saying, I want to work for these guys as well as, we want to work with this person.
Yeah.
And I usually spend half an hour of that interview saying, this is our company, this is our recruitment process, this is what we expect, this is how people are in our company, this is our culture.
Mhm.
And that brings me back also to the role of the CEO. I think the CEO needs to set the culture. You are the center of how the culture is by acting it and being it. So if you're a tyrant, everybody's going to be a tyrant, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, back to that interview process, that conversation. After half an hour, I asked them, should we continue? And about 10% then say, this is not worth it. What if I don't get the job? And that's again another self-selection process
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
you weed out people that don't have the stamina and grit, especially when you're building a company from the ground up, a startup. You need those kind of people on the bus.
Mm. It's interesting
And
you make the
yeah,
point about looking for
yeah,
people that have faced adversity,
yeah.
because you only learn about dealing with problems by having problems. I mean, you can't, it's not the sort of thing you can learn from a textbook, is it? I mean,
No.
you have to go through that process to build up that resilience, and that is so often the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, at least how you deal with them, because people
Yeah.
say, oh, I had a pretty good life. I haven't had any, adversity, but everybody has had something that were really stuck. And
Yeah.
you find that during a conversation. And it's not about prying. People tell what they want to tell and, go into depth if they feel like it. But that's when you get to the real meat of a person. And they ask us questions in return as well. And I actually love that about it. And then at the end of a 3 hour, we have a pretty good idea of the personality type. And that's key for us because we use basically the Jungian Type Index or Myers-Briggs as the next level of the recruitment process. So we already know in like to some extent, are you extroverted, introverted? Are you intuitive or here and now? Are you a decision maker with feelings or with the rationale? Are you structured or are you flexible? And that helps us figure out whether does this person fit that job specifically. Now, if you're highly introverted and you don't like talking to people and you feel that closed upness, you wouldn't fit into a sales job. But these people also apply to sales jobs. If you are a person that can't stop talking and you love speaking to people, maybe sitting in the logistics department when you're doing calculations and price negotiations is not the right fit, right? So you find out does this person actually fit the job and will they enjoy it? And that's the most important thing. Will they enjoy that job or did they just apply for it? And then we test for that. They do a test with a professional service that we use that can come and you can't fail the test. It's just that we have a conversation afterwards. Maybe this is not the right position for you because it requires X, Y, Z kind of personality. And most of the time they're in agreement with that. They don't they don't try to argue against it because that's who they are. And that helps us also weed out people that just doesn't fit
Yeah.
the job in itself, the daily tasks, because that's a lot of jobs are the daily tasks.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And
And that process of getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats
yeah,
is absolutely critical because this idea that your staff are your most important resource is
yeah.
only true if they're focused on the right things and doing the right things, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's why, when we've done that, when we come to that process, that's when we do a skill test. So they get 3 days to do a skill test to show that they actually, they have the skill required. And, for any founders that out there that don't know how to, how do you verify a skill for an IT developer or for a marketing specialist when you don't have the skill yourself? It's very hard.
Yeah.
And what we did, we outsourced it to a consulting firm saying, can you do an hour consultation with this person, talk shop only? With the test that we made together with that consulting firm. And can you verify that would you hire this person based on skill alone? And that's an hour technical talk. And when we get that result back, if we can't verify them ourselves because we're a smaller organization, we know skill check, let's move on. And that's when we get to the most important step in our recruitment process, which was a coffee with a colleague. So we picked two colleagues that had very opposite personalities. We sat them down with the candidate one by one, and they're just going to have a conversation, talk about the movies, cats, whatever interests you. And that's where most people failed because that's the cultural test.
Right.
Will people in our company enjoy working with you, and would you
Yeah.
enjoy working with us?
Yeah.
Because I had people, my colleagues come out of that meeting going, fantastic. I just love it. You're gonna love working with this person. And other going, that was the longest hour of my life. And you know that, or we had one lady that just came like, I can't lead this person. And she was the one who's supposed to lead that person. Then it doesn't matter if the
Yeah.
best fit culturally and everything, the culture, I mean, skill-wise, because the culture fit is not off. And the cultural fit was the most important thing for us, where we saw it didn't really matter if they didn't have the skills because skills can be learned.
Yes,
But
right.
if you have the wrong culture fit, it can affect the whole basket of apples. And that's what we tried to do. So it was quite extensive. And of course, after that, we did references as well. And through a process like that, you know the candidate pretty well. And especially when you are a small team, you can't hire 100 people and fire them quick and fast like you can in the US. I think it's very important to invest heavily time and resources into actually recruitment. And it starts with the CEO, it starts with the leader that will manage that person. And I think that's how we get the right people on the bus. And I think that's how we get them in the right seat. And of course, as I said earlier, you need to have a kick-ass COO who can drive the bus and make sure that the daily tasks are the right tasks.
A
That's not the
very
CEO
good point.
jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point. I'm just conscious of the time. Let's move on to
Yeah.
a couple of other things. I mean, because you've kind of set out a really comprehensive process there, which I think other people could follow, actually. I mean,
Hmm.
and I'm impressed by the depth of thought to that. Because if you don't get the right people on, you've got an even bigger problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's really, your point is really well made. Let me ask you about going into new markets. Now,
Yeah,
you're
sure.
on the point of, expanding into a lot of more. I mean, on the one hand, you get people that do a lot of research, develop a market entry strategy, go visit
Mm,
spend a lot of money learning about whatever the jurisdiction is, whatever the country is. And on the other hand, you get people that say, "Oh, I think there's some useful stuff going on in Germany. I'm going to go there." I mean,
yeah.
where are you on that spectrum in terms of market entry? I mean, how do you feel about that process? Do you invest a lot of time, or do you just follow demand or follow your gut? I mean, what's your take?
Well, it depends on the business, I think. When it comes to Clover Tax, it's more about demand than anything else.
Right.
Because it's not a cultural market entry, right? We basically facilitate, helping you with an exit strategy from your home country and then an entry strategy for full tax optimization legally in your jurisdiction of choice. So in that sense, we don't really sell something to the country that we're entering. We're selling to the country that is exiting, and mostly that's European Union, Canada, the US. So culturally for us, that's quite easy. But when it comes to another business that, for example, like my previous business, where you're entering with a physical product or a unique product that you made to another market, I think it becomes a lot more complex. Now, if you have a technical digital product, like an app or anything like that, it just expand. I think just expand, see what works, and then, double down on what works, basic growth hacking techniques, to be honest. But if you have a physical product, like one of my former employees before I started my pet company, did meal kits like HelloFresh,
All
Blue
right.
Apron, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, but in Scandinavia. So they were the largest, they became the largest company. I joined it at, 700,000 in revenue and we took it to 30 million in just 2 years. And they, delivered meal kits. And that is very hard to expand country by country because of different meal habits, different dinner habits, different preferences when it comes to meals, different types of groceries that is available. So that kind of market entry is very complex, I think. And that's when you need to do more market research. But I think what people tend to mistake is that they start doing regulatory checks, they started doing tax checks, they started doing business checks. I think, and market demand, I think do product checks. Does your product actually work in the market? And do it as cheaply and easily as possible. Take a product on a stand and see if people want to reorder with an Excel spreadsheet. Keep it as simple as possible. Unless you are, you have a lot of money you can spend and you can expand very fast. But I saw it like this meal kit business and their mother company. They did 100 million euros in sales a year. And they tried to expand to the UK, to Finland, to the Netherlands, to Germany, and not a single country took the concept
Wow.
because they thought they could take the Swedish model to these countries, and it just didn't work. And they lost tens of millions of euros in the process of that. So I think product testing is the most important. I think that hiring people on the ground in your industry is key. Um, Otherwise, yeah, if you're going to sit from Norway or you're going to sit from the UK and think, I'm going to figure out how we're going to do Italy, I think you're going to hit a wall. I think you need to hire people locally. I think you need to spend good time on finding the right country, especially for product entries like that have very specific cultural and regional differences from your original market.
To come back to your business, though, I mean, I take your point. It's almost the opposite way round, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, but that also, when you're dealing with people like that, that potentially throws up some interesting ethical issues, doesn't it? About giving people the right advice, because these things can be nuanced sometimes. I mean, give us your take on how you manage that process, because you want to get that right. That's really important both for you and for the clients. But there's sometimes there are multiple ways to do things, which can kind of muddy the waters a little bit, I think. So what's your take on those kind of ethical questions in relation to that?
Well, I think that when it comes to ethics, I just think it's about being clear. Like, when they have a meeting with me, it's a strategy consultation. What are you trying to achieve? Um, what is your current setup in your current situation? What's your ideal outcome?
Yeah.
Where would you prefer to live and what's important about that? And when it comes to the legal side of things, that's dealt with by the lawyers. I make sure that there's professionals in the room all the time. We don't give any legal advice or tax advice. I don't cross that border in any way. Even though I understand it well, I am very clear before I start a meeting. There's no legal or tax advice. But we're going to talk about, the framework
Yeah.
of how we go about this. And then it's going to be down to the tax advisors and the tax lawyers to facilitate this legally and build that strategy specifically for each client situations. So I don't really have much issue with that. It's just trying to be very clear with the client that, this is where this starts and that ends. And as long as we do that and we don't, interject, that's why, for example, I don't use any outbound salespeople trying to sell these kind of services. I know there's companies that do that, try to sell
Mm.
golden visas or golden passports, and that get muddy very, very quickly when you
Yeah.
outsource that. And you
Exactly.
can't outsource things like this because, as I say to a lot of my clients, when especially when if some people, oh, that was a bit expensive because we're a high end provider. It's like you don't want to cross in from tax optimization to tax evasion.
Mm.
It's important that we keep it white, legal, and not into the gray area because gray is not an area you want to be in, even if it's gray and it's the
Yeah.
legals are not defined. And as long as you do that, I think you're fine. But once you start outsourcing, and I've seen this in other companies as well, where we, again, back to the meal kits, we had sellers on the doors and telephones selling these products, and they lie through their teeth to get a sale through, right? Because you can't control what's being said in that room. So for
Yeah.
us, we need to have massive control over each representative that talks to the client, and we need to be in the room for the handover. And then, of course, we have partners, trusted partners with good reputation that we know that we can trust on when we are no longer in the room. And I think that's how I deal with the ethics part of our business.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because I think, I mean, that kind of transparency, that clarity is the basis on which you build trust, isn't it? So if you haven't
Absolutely.
got that, you can't build trust, which means it won't work in the longer run. So, I mean, I totally get your point
Yeah,
about the
absolutely.
importance of that. So,
No, I
so
think you're spot on.
let me just move on to what you've learned from the journey. So, I mean, it sounds to me like it's been a pretty interesting journey. You know, your previous company, this company, the things that you're about to do, which we'll come to in a
Mhm.
second. I mean, when you look back on the journey, I mean, have there been things that really pushed you out of your comfort zone?
Oh, I think every day. I think that if you live in your comfort zone, you're not growing. The only way you can grow is to leave that comfort zone, and you're going to be uncomfortable all the time. I remember, for example, when I went to school, I had stage fright like no other. Speaking in front of a crowd was the worst thing. It still gets to me today. But I volunteered every time it was, will somebody present X topic? Can somebody take the microphone and present or speak for the group or whatever? And I took that responsibility every time. And it made me very good at preparing because I think that preparation, beats nerves almost every single time. If you know your material in and out, it doesn't really matter if you mess up. And I think that, just being out of your comfort zone all the time gets you comfortable with being
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
yeah.
That's the irony of courage. You only get it off you've done it, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so I think that's the key when you're going through a journey like this. And I feel it every day. I think if I don't, I'm doing something wrong, to be honest.
Yeah. I think a lot of entrepreneurs say that. Um, Let me ask you about the other side to that. Have there ever been times when you look back and think you'd wish you'd been a bit bolder and you stuck your
Oh,
neck out a bit
oh,
more than most
absolutely.
people?
Oh, absolutely. I think that like I think there's a lot of opportunities like that through life, to be honest. Like I had an opportunity to go to Brighton and study marketing when I was 16. I didn't take it. Maybe I should have had done that instead. I stayed in Norway, right? What kind of journey would my life be on if I did something like that so early? The UK was, very different back then than it is today. I studied in China, and then the financial crisis of 2008 hit, and I decided to go home to Norway. instead of building a company in China. Maybe I should have done that. So there's stuff like this that I think about. I think about this like I started my company in Norway, but I think also like that I should have left Norway much sooner. I should probably have gone to the US to try to build a company. I think it would have fitted me like a glove at that time and at that age, but I
Yeah,
was too scared to do it, right?
yeah,
So of course, I think that it's a lot of these things. Even when it comes to investors, right? You should have been bolder. You should ask for more money. You should have higher goals. You should have thought about a much broader expansion strategy. But at the other side of that, I don't think I had grown enough to be able to handle it if it gone wrong, right? So some people don't have that shame at all. They can just keep going, lose other people's money. I don't have that. I have a blockade when it comes to
yeah.
spending other people's money. So
I'm sure your investors are pleased to hear that.
yeah, yeah, at least we made them some money when we sold the business. So I think I'm on good terms with everybody there for now, at least.
And when you look back on the journey, what are the things that you're most proud of? I mean, you've done a lot. What are the big things that
Ooh.
you think, yeah, I'm really pleased about that?
I think I'm most proud of the fact that I didn't give up when I wanted to. I went to work almost for a whole year knowing that we were going bankrupt, that we raised 400,000 euros from investors, and we had nothing to show for it for over a year. We messed around. We tried to be smarter than we needed to be. We tried to find product market fits that were way more complicated and technical than it needed to be than the original concept was. And then we reverted back to the original concept and just focused on selling. And even then growing, we were going basically closing in a bankruptcy. Investors weren't willing to invest, and we had employees. I think that I didn't give up that then is something that I'm extremely proud of because that was really hard. That's some of the toughest things I've done. I've been bullied in school for 10 years, and I think actually going through that kind of process was harder. So it helped prepare me for that kind of journey, to be honest. And the second thing I'm most proud of is the fact that every person on my team, because I was the CMO in my company, told me after the fact that I use you as an example of what a good leader is, and I would like to work for you again. That is the two most things I'm most proud of in my entrepreneurial career, I think.
Yeah, well done. Um, and if you were starting again, I mean, what would you do differently this time around?
Well, I've done differently this time around. I chose a different jurisdiction where the taxes and the business environment are friendlier, where it's also easier to raise capital because in a culture like Cyprus, where I live, you you don't raise money on the idea. You raise money on your reputation
Mm,
and are you the person who can execute? And I think that's a flaw in the investor model in today's society where you have an intern with 2, 3 weeks of work experience telling me who's been building companies for 15, 20 years that I don't think your idea has any merit to it because they all evaluate the idea, right? Is it within the now, investors work on fear of missing out, right? So I think that's part of it. I think that that's very beneficial by choosing a different jurisdiction. I think you need to think about this today, to be honest.
mm,
I would also take on investors later than we did. I would probably get more traction, more proof of concept, bootstrap more if you can. Um, and I would also be way more cautious about the founder team composition.
mm.
I think it's critical, which is one of the reasons why we succeeded with our pet company, was that we were four very different people and we had very different skills. And what I see in most teams, and I've done this mistake so many times myself before I had my big break, that I found more people like me with overlapping and skills that were too similar to me. They didn't complement me, and that turns things into a mess very quickly. And we even had that situation back in the pet company where we had a founder early on that overlapped very hardly with another of my co-founders, and one of them had to leave eventually. And then we got another guy in who was very different again. So
Yeah.
I think that's the things that I would do
Yeah.
mostly
I mean,
differently.
it's really interesting you make that point because I'm a huge believer in that diversity of thought. You need
Yeah.
multiple perspectives to come at a problem to get to the best answer. If you both come at it the same way, or if three of you come at it the same way, you'll get a an
Mm.
answer. Won't necessarily be the best one. I mean, it might be a more convenient one sometimes, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's not convenient in the long run, right?
No,
When you
that's right.
start getting problems because you're sitting there with one view of the world. I think that diversity of thought is one of the key elements in the founder team in any,
Yeah.
group of people, to be honest, at the workplace to be able to succeed.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And there's
yeah, I
evidence.
think that's key.
There's actually research evidence to support that, I think.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one last question, which isn't really about your business, although it was kind of about your business. But AI starting to
Hmm.
change lots of knowledge work scenarios.
Yes.
And it's not totally clear how that's going to play out yet. I mean, what's your take on the way AI is going to impact on your kind of industry, both in your company, but also, and this is the question I often wonder about, is how will your customers start
Mm.
using AI to solve their own problems? And that's one of the things I think is
Mm.
interesting. I mean, what's your
Mm.
take on the kind of the way AI is unfolding?
Well, I think it's an incredible opportunity, but also a huge risk. We see already that most of the clients we meet with have already spoken extensively with either Gemini or ChatGPT or
Yeah,
something like that,
exactly.
trying to figure it out. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
even though in theory AI will be able to weed through all tax regulations in the world and find what's the best scenario for you given enough information, um, at least for now, AI lies a lot. It invents a lot of information, which is
yeah,
inaccurate. And you say, oh, but this is not correct. This is how it is. Oh, yes, you're right. I'm sorry. I think that's going to be very tricky when it comes to taxes because as soon as you start relying on AI for that and it's not 100% reliable or close to at least, you go from tax optimization to tax evasion,
yeah.
and tax evasion is usually punished more severely by law than murder is. So I'm not too worried about that, but I do think it's a massive opportunity. I think it comes from a government point of view, to be honest. Like how many lawyers and people that have studied, law for years, so will soon be out of work with that kind of setup. So I think governments will intervene, setting restrictions on what's possible and not, but as a tool to make our work more efficient, faster, better, and especially cut out the grinding tasks of writing drafts
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I think it's very helpful. Of course, nobody knows where AI will end, and AI today looks complicated and sophisticated, but it's very far off from the capacity and the storage and the energy needed of a human brain, even with how little we use of its capacity, to be honest. So I see it as an opportunity. I think, especially here where we live in the European Union, it will be regulated. It's like the meme that's all over the internet that the US innovates, China imitates, and the EU regulates. And I think we're going to get a lot of regulations that's going to protect jobs extensively, to be honest. That's going to hinder it to go that far. But I still think it's a massive opportunity. And I think that the companies that work with AI will win the future.
Mm,
But in our sense, we are in the people business more than anything,
mm.
the people that we work with and the people that are our clients, and it needs a personal touch, not because the tax advice needs to be given by a human, but because that there's a human holding your hand through the process and guiding you. I think
Something about
that's the key
reassurance.
element. Yeah, reassurance,
Yeah.
trust. Like you don't trust the machine the way you trust the person that's building that over time and being in your corner over time. I think at least. Especially when it comes to complicated matter like this, you want to know that you're certain and at least the way it is today, I don't think anyone feels that they're certain when they ask ChatGPT for genuine advice on something
Yeah, no,
complicated.
no, I'm sure that's right. I mean, I guess the question is how quickly things change, isn't it? Really? I mean, it's going to be,
Yeah.
my view is it's going to be really interesting few years, I think. So,
Oh, absolutely.
Oyvind, thank you for taking a bit of time out to share that story. I mean, what you're doing is fascinating. I mean, and it's really interesting, this whole thing about the way these things are evolving so
Mm.
quickly, and our ability to maximize, to take on those opportunities, to exploit, I suppose is perhaps the right word, those opportunities.
Mm. Absolutely.
It's very exciting, I think. So anyway, I mean, thank you. I mean, really interesting. And good luck with the next bit. I know because you're about to launch a
Yeah.
big expansion. So I hope that goes well and maybe come back in a year or two and let us know how you got on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure speaking to you. And I wish you all the best with your podcast. I'm going to be tuning in moving forward and would love to come back at some point in the future.
I look forward to it. Cheers, Elvin. Bye bye.
Cheers.